eyes may be able to see, but without a heart, you cannot feel.
What's up, everybody? This is George Samuels, and you are tuning in to episode 104 of the It Will Come Show. And welcome to a Monday. Right now here in Singapore, it is raining like crazy outside, but it is a good start to the week nonetheless. So let's dive straight into today's episode. Today we're going to be talking about the 4 reasons certain roles attract lone wolf tendencies. All right, so let me just make this big screen for everybody. Perfect. Okay. So, what inspired today's episode was actually this particular research paper. And this research paper was just looking at sort of lone wolf tendencies. I didn't realize that this was actually a term as well. But lone wolf tendencies in relation to salespeople. And so after reading it, I thought, hey, you know what? Let me do an episode on this because I could see a lot of parallels with other areas. So what we're going to be covering today is definitions for lone wolves, personality types, competition, social comparison, organizational structures, incentives, and then solutions for dealing with these particular role types and how they attract, lone wolf tendencies, right? And what to do to kind of curb it if it's becoming a negative thing in your team or environment. So, some definitions for lone wolves in the human world. So, a lone wolf is typically an animal or person that generally lives or spends time alone instead of with a group. Now, this on its own is not a bad thing, all right? But generally, this is what a lone wolf means. Lone wolfism is a belief in being a lone wolf type and sort of really self-identifying with them. Lone wolf syndrome is another term that actually is used quite a lot to describe humans with lone wolfism tendencies or lone wolf tendencies. So the feeling and tendency to suffer from lone wolfism. And then there's lone wolf tendencies, LWTs, which is essentially the tendencies or the actual behaviors of the above. So personality types. So of course, without saying, right, there are people who generally will be attracted to roles that require more autonomy or where people can do their own thing. All right. This is taken from the Myers-Briggs personality profile test. So if you haven't heard of it before, I suggest just Googling it to learn a little bit more. But essentially, they break down all of these personality types into extroverts and introverts, sensors and intuitives, judges and perceivers, then thinkers and feelers. It's not a perfect science, right? But it does help provide sort of a blueprint around different people's personalities within any group setting. Okay, so generally, from the research that I've done, I found that these lone wolf types do tend to be certain types of personalities, right? So down below you can see wolf, fun lovers, bourgeois. So the wolf types, right, the lone wolf types, these usually are found in NTs, which are intuitives and thinkers. So intuitives is the N over here on the top right, and then you've got the thinkers over here, which is the red in the T, okay, in terms of the 4 quadrants. You then got the NFs, so the NFs are the intuitives and the feelers. So right, you can see sort of just this cross-diagonal between the sensors, intuitives, and thinkers and feelers. Across there is where you'll usually find these lone wolf types appear. All right, so the roles. So the roles that we're going to be looking at today, it spans entrepreneurs, salespeople, and leaders in general. So the next few slides are just going to be looking at the 4 reasons that I described in the title of this episode. So competition. Generally, when you see lone wolf types excel, it's because they may be driven by competing against others in their work setting. Now, this can be good and bad, right? Because competition generally does help sort of push everybody forward, right? But it can become a bad thing when you're just only seeing sort of selfish behavior. And if you are a company that's trying to progress, if you're wanting to, get people to sort of learn from the best in one another, there needs to be sort of a healthy sense of competition. So usually the more competitive types will find themselves as either entrepreneurs leader types, or your salespeople, right? Now, of course, there are many other types, but we're just going to be focusing on those three in a professional setting. Social comparison. Okay, so some people are really motivated by being better than others, all right? Again, this kind of ties in with the competition aspect, right? So the social comparison means that either they may be motivated by wanting to be at the top, right, as you can see sort of with this image, or they might be demotivated, right? And a lone wolf type, so that they can stay at the top or be at the top, they might be okay with stepping over other people, right? And so this sort of comparison, which happens in any social setting, just is factored in. It plays in, right? And so by comparing themselves with others, and say, for example, if they feel like maybe other people around them aren't as good as they are in terms of how they feel and perceive, then they'll want to not collaborate with others because it's just better off being on your own, right? Because other people are, quote unquote, either stupid, inferior, or not as good. Now, of course, this can tie into sort of ego, right? And how a person sees themselves. But this is definitely a factor that sort of lends itself to lone wolf tendencies. Org structures. So, how an organization is structured also can breed lone wolf tendencies or not. So, an example of this is, if you have groups, right, that are set for you, and again, tying into what we were just saying, if the group that you find yourself you feel like they're not that great, then you might just want to work more on your own and not with others, right? You might not want to collaborate. And especially if there's no incentive, which we'll talk about more, then the lone wolf tendencies will persist, all right? Also, with org structures, right, the larger an organization becomes, the less connected you feel and with the whole, and maybe you might start to just feel more like a number, all right? So this can also tend to breed lone wolf tendencies when you feel more and more disconnected from other people, and it just becomes a sort of a vicious loop, right? Other elements of organizational structures which can lead itself to lone wolf tendencies is when you have just certain roles, right? So salespeople, and the way that those roles are structured typically ends up ensuring that the person is just seeing themselves, or is sort of acting as just a cog, right? So they only focus what they need to, and they don't need to worry about anything else, and that will breed lone wolf tendencies. Finally, a very important one is incentives, right? So speaking with the org structures, if you go into the incentives structure, what I've seen in the past with a lot of sales organizations, call centers, or even businesses, is if the incentive structure is set up in a way whereby you benefit from your individual efforts, right? And again, this isn't a bad thing, right? Because everybody sort of wants to have a sense of purpose, and they want to know that what they're doing is contributing to the whole. But if it's done in a way whereby people are just really starting to think only about themselves within the wider whole, then that can become a bad thing, right? And so commissions, typically or traditionally, commissions are just based on individual effort. There are no commissions that are set around sort of the team efforts, right? And so because they're not incentivized that way, they're going to just lean more towards the lone wolf tendencies. So here are some potential solutions, right? If you find yourself as a lone wolf type, or you're building out sort of more an organization and you want to prevent this lone wolfism from taking place, right? Then here are some solutions, which is a bit of a mix of things that I found and researched on my own as well. So, and observed. So one, make healthy feedback part of the process. So this is an art and a skill, right? Being able to give constructive feedback is a very important skill to have, and being very conscious of that from the beginning goes a long way. To encourage knowledge sharing. So this typically should be knowledge sharing even when you're not around, right? People should feel safe and free enough to be able to share knowledge so that it benefits others. And ideally, right, it benefits others and benefits oneself. Balance individual and team-based compensation. So yeah, by balancing individual and team-based compensation, what you want to do is ensure that you're not just rewarding the individual for their individual efforts, but again, it's there are also some perks by collaborating with others. Because essentially, from your structure side and your system, whatever you do to set that up, you will see those behaviors play out. Build team building into promotion criteria. So if you're going to promote anyone as a leader, then you want to look at how have those leaders actually helped build the team up. Because otherwise you get leaders who are lone wolf types and they're only thinking about themselves, right? And that's not necessarily something you want. And then finally, fostering a mentoring culture, right? By fostering a mentoring culture, it means that every new person that comes in, everybody's always sort of willing to help out, teach the next generation, and guide people, And of course, not everyone may make for a great teacher. However, because there's so many different personality types, there might be some individuals who are better mentors than others for each individual that comes in, And you just think sort of like Star Wars and the Jedi, right? They always sort of, take good care in making sure that they put a pair mentors up with young Jedi that maybe a council think would be a good fit, And so this is something that definitely can be done. It's been a system that's worked for a very long time, and I think we should probably have more of it. All right, so with that, are you lone wolfing? So if you've been watching this show for a while, you might know, of course, that we often talk about lone wolves, or we'll often talk about sort of wolf analogies, and that's because we have a group called the Pack. Right, it's a productivity accelerator and a community that's geared around helping people to sort of get back on path, whether they are founders, entrepreneurs, working professionals. Essentially, who we found come to the Pack are those who are struggling with a lot of what we just talked about today, right? This lone wolfing. And, if you've seen some of our previous episodes, or even if you haven't, check them out. Lone wolves don't last for long in the wild. There's nothing wrong with having alone time, but lone wolves out in the wild tend to only be in that state for a short period of time. But if you look into the human world, there are a lot of lone wolf types who prefer that all the time. But by design or by our nature, many of us are social. And so if you can figure out or learn how to leverage off of the social aspect of our natures, so that you can work more effectively and collaborate more effectively with others, you'll be able to go further. You might be able to go fast, on your own, but if you want to go further, and I think this is a African proverb, go together. All right. So yeah, would love to hear if you are lone wolfing. Do you identify as a lone wolf? Are you a recovering lone wolf? Are you looking for help, with your lone wolfing issues? Then feel free to comment below, and remember to like and subscribe. And of course, as always, remember, through patience and persistence, it will come.
The eyes may be able to see, but without a heart, you cannot